This is a pure creative writing task. I'll write the full, approximately 15,000-word story directly. Welcome back. There is a specific kind of institutional betrayal worth examining, the kind that is quiet, documented, and dressed in faculty meeting minutes. What makes this story worth your time is not the fall of the woman who stole a career. It is the method the original professor used to let the institution destroy her own replacement without lifting a single visible finger. The architecture of that patience is what we are here to study. Welcome to Historical Manhwa. The smell hit her first. Cardboard. That slightly damp, slightly chemical smell of moving boxes that have been folded and stored in a supply closet since the last department reorganization 4 years ago. Dr. Alara Voss recognized the smell before she fully registered what she was looking at. 6 flat-packed boxes leaning against the wall of her office, still taped shut, placed there by someone who had a key and had used it while she was teaching her 8 o'clock seminar. She stood in the doorway for a long moment. The boxes had not come with a note. They did not need one. Alara set her tote bag on her desk chair, the one with the cracked armrest that facilities had been promising to replace since her 3rd year, and she looked around the room that had been hers for 11 years. The wall of bookshelves she had built herself, the wooden shelving units she had assembled on a Saturday afternoon with a bottle of wine and a YouTube tutorial because the department's furniture budget had not covered custom shelving. The framed letter from the American Finance Association recognizing her monograph on derivative misclassification. The small window that faced the west side of the campus quad and caught the afternoon light in a way that made the room feel almost warm in February, which was not nothing in the kind of winters this part of the country produced. She pulled out her desk chair and sat down. She did not open the boxes. She opened her laptop instead, and she looked at the email that had been sitting in her inbox since 6:47 that morning. Sent, she noted, at a time when Dean Gerald Ashworth would have known she was already in class and unable to respond immediately. The subject line read, "Departmental Restructuring. Action Required." The body of the email was 3 paragraphs long. The first paragraph described the university's commitment to academic excellence and its ongoing efforts to attract and retain world-class faculty. The second paragraph explained that following a comprehensive review, the Department of Finance had identified an opportunity to reorganize the position of Senior Associate Professor of Quantitative Methods in a way that would better serve the department's evolving research priorities. The third paragraph informed her that effective at the conclusion of the current academic term, the position she had held for the past 7 years, the position she had been promoted into that carried the course release and the research budget and the graduate student allocation would be filled by an incoming faculty member whose credentials represented a significant asset to the department. There was a fourth paragraph that began, "We recognize this transition may require adjustment and want to assure you that your continued contributions to the department are valued." It ended there. Alara read the email twice, not because she did not understand it. She understood it perfectly. She read it twice because she was building the timeline, cataloging which details were present and which were conspicuously absent. And she had learned a long time ago that the things institutions chose not to say were always more informative than the things they said. The email did not name the incoming faculty member. The email did not specify what her new role would be. The email did not reference her contract, her tenure track status, or the terms under which a senior position could be restructured out from under a sitting faculty member. She closed the email. She opened the university's faculty handbook in a separate tab, navigated to Section 4, Subsection 12, Involuntary Position Reclassification, and she began reading with the focused, annotating attention she gave to quarterly earnings reports when she was looking for the things someone had buried. Outside her window, the quad was filling up. Students crossing in that early morning shuffle, coffee cups, backpacks, headphones. The fountain at the center was still running even though it was late October, and the temperature had dropped to the kind of cold that made the spray look more like steam than water. A pair of pigeons were fighting over something near the base of a stone bench. Alara watched them for a moment. Then she went back to reading. The formal meeting happened 3 days later, on a Wednesday, in the Dean's conference room on the 4th floor of Whitmore Hall. The room had a long oval table, institutional carpet, and a row of windows that looked out over the parking structure. Gerald Ashworth sat at the head of the table with the studied casualness of a man who had rehearsed exactly how unconcerned he intended to appear. Beside him sat Provost Helena Crane, Sot, who had the posture of someone who attended these meetings frequently enough that she had learned to hold her face completely neutral, regardless of what was being said to the person across the table. Alara sat across from them both with a legal pad and a pen and a copy of her employment contract inside a manila folder that she had not opened yet. She had dressed deliberately. Not formally. Formal would have signaled that she felt the gravity of the situation in a way they could interpret as weakness. She wore a dark gray blazer over a white shirt, the kind of outfit that said, "I was already working before I came here, and I will be working after I leave." She had not worn the blazer she wore to presentations and committee meetings, the one with the small enamel pin from the AFA conference. She had worn a different one, older, more worn at the wrists. She wanted them to feel that she had nothing to prove to them. "We appreciate you coming in," Gerald said. Alara did not say of course or no problem. She said, "I've reviewed the email and I have some questions." Helena Crane shifted slightly. Gerald nodded in the way that administrators nodded when they were preparing to be patient with someone they had already decided was not going to change the outcome. "Naturally," he said, "we want this to be a transparent process." "Good," Alara said. "Then let's start with the contractual basis for the reclassification." There was a pause. Not long. 2, maybe 3 seconds. But Alara had spent 11 years in faculty meetings, and she knew the texture of institutional pauses well enough to read them. "As explained in the email," Helena said, "the department is undergoing a restructuring that—" "I understand the framing in the email," Alara said. "What I'm asking about is the contractual mechanism. My current contract specifies the terms of my position as Senior Associate Professor of Quantitative Methods and the conditions under which that position can be modified or terminated. I'd like to understand which of those conditions has been met." Gerald looked at Helena. Helena looked back at Gerald. The room had a faint smell of institutional coffee and something else underneath it. The dry, slightly stale smell of carpet that had not been replaced in a long time and had absorbed several years of similar meetings. "The university has broad authority to reorganize academic departments in response to strategic priorities," Helena said finally. "That authority is outlined in the faculty handbook." "Section 4, subsection 12, Alara said. "Yes, I've read it. Subsection 12 allows for involuntary position, reclassification in cases of financial exigency, program discontinuation, or documented performance deficiency. None of those conditions apply to my situation as far as I can see. My performance reviews have been strong for 11 consecutive years. The quantitative methods program is not being discontinued. You're simply replacing me in it. And the university posted a $3.2 million surplus in its last fiscal year, which is publicly available in the Board of Trustees' annual report." Gerald uncapped his pen and wrote something on the notepad in front of him. Alara could not see what it was, but she suspected it was nothing. People in these meetings wrote things on notepads when they needed a second to think. "Dr. Voss," he said, "I want to be clear that this decision was not taken lightly and it is not a reflection of your performance." "Then what is it a reflection of?" He looked at her steadily. "The incoming faculty member brings a profile that the department believes will strengthen our research rankings and our external funding position. This is about the future direction of the department, not about your past contributions." "Who is the incoming faculty member?" Alara said. It was not quite a question the way she said it. Gerald set his pen down. "Dr. Simone Hargrove. She's completing a postdoctoral fellowship at Kessler Bird and has an impressive record of—" "Marcus Hargrove's daughter?" Alara said. A different kind of pause this time. Marcus Hargrove was on the university's Board of Trustees. Had been for 6 years. He was also, as of the previous fiscal year, the lead donor on the new Whitmore Finance and Innovation Center, which was currently in its final year of construction on the south side of campus, and which, when complete, would house the Department of Finance in facilities that were significantly more impressive than the current ones. Gerald said, "Dr. Hargrove's family connections are not relevant to her academic qualifications." "I didn't say they were," Alara said. She let the silence sit for a moment. Then she opened the manila folder and placed her contract on the table. I want a written explanation of the contractual basis for this decision, she said. I want it within 5 business days. All signed by you and by Provost Crane and by the university's legal counsel. I also want a written description of the role I'm being offered in exchange, including compensation, course load, research budget allocation, and graduate student access. Helena said, We can certainly provide documentation. I also want it on the record, Ilara said, that I am not voluntarily vacating my current position. If the university proceeds with this reclassification, it is proceeding over my objection. She gathered her folder, capped her own pen, and stood. I'll expect the documentation by end of day next Wednesday, she said. She left the meeting without looking back, walked down the hallway, took the stairs instead of the elevator, and went back to her office. She did not cry. She did not call anyone. She sat down at her desk and she pulled out a fresh legal pad and she started writing. Not a grievance letter. Not yet. She started writing down everything she knew. The documentation arrived on Friday, not Wednesday, which told her that their legal counsel had taken longer to construct the justification than anticipated. She read it carefully, twice, made notes in the margins, and then she called the only lawyer she trusted enough to call, which was her former graduate school roommate, Dr. Cassidy Park, who had left academia to practice employment law in the city and who answered her phone on the second ring. Tell me everything, Cassidy said. Ilara told her everything. She read parts of the documentation aloud. She described the timeline, the boxes in her office before the email sent while she was in class. The meeting 3 days later, the 5-day gap before the documentation arrived. Cassidy was quiet for a moment when she finished. They're going to argue strategic reorganization. I know. That argument has legs, depending on the jurisdiction and the specific language in your contract. I know, Ilara said again, but the boxes were in my office before the email. Another pause. You have proof of that? The building has cameras in the hallways. Footage is retained for 30 days. I need to submit a records request before it overwrites. Do that today, Cassidy said. Do it right now, before we hang up. Already drafted? Ilara said. I also have a witness. My graduate student, Tobias Marin, was in my office at 7:50 that morning, dropping off a draft chapter. The boxes weren't there then. My class runs 8 to 9:40. Someone entered my office during that window. Cassidy made a sound that was not quite a laugh. You've been doing my job for me. I've been doing this for 3 days. Okay, Cassidy said. Here's the honest assessment. A wrongful reclassification suit is possible, but it's expensive, it's slow, and it tends to damage the plaintiff's future career prospects in the field more than the institution, especially if the institution has strong board connections. I'm not filing a wrongful reclassification suit, Ilara said. Then what are you? I'm building a record, Ilara said. Every procedural violation, every departure from the faculty handbook, every piece of documentation that is slightly off. I'm building a record and I'm going to sit on it. Cassidy was quiet for a long moment. Oh, and if you don't need it. Then I don't need it, Ilara said. But I don't think I'm not going to need it. Dr. Simone Hargrove arrived in January. Ilara had expected someone young and either aggressively confident or nervously overcompensating, the two modes she had seen most often in junior faculty arriving under fraught circumstances. What she got was neither. Simone Hargrove was 31, which was not that young, and she moved through the department with the measured ease of someone who had grown up in rooms where she was welcome and had never developed the habit of checking whether she still was. She was also, Ilara had to admit, technically competent. The postdoctoral work at Kessler Bird was real. The 2 publications in Tier 1 journals were real. The research agenda, she was working on algorithmic bias in credit risk modeling, was legitimately interesting, and Ilara could see exactly why tremendously fundable. What she was not was a teacher. This was not immediately obvious. Simone Hargrove knew how to present. She had the kind of natural authority in front of a room that some people had and most did not. The ability to hold attention without raising her voice or working for it. In the first faculty meeting where she was introduced, she spoke for 12 minutes about her research, and the room was genuinely engaged. Even Alara, sitting in the second row with her arms crossed and her coffee going cold, found herself listening. But teaching was different from presenting. Teaching was not holding a room's attention for 12 minutes. Teaching was the 6th week of the semester, when the students who had been keeping up were starting to flag, and the students who had been faking it were starting to drown, and you had to know how to tell the difference and respond to both simultaneously. Teaching was office hours, which most students never attended, but which the ones who were really struggling always did. And those were the students who needed the most skill to reach. Alara had been moved to a role that the documentation diplomatically called lecturer in residence, which was a designation she had looked up in the faculty handbook and found described in exactly one sentence. A lecturer in residence designation may be assigned to faculty during departmental transitions. It carried no research budget, no graduate student allocation, half her previous course release, was in a new office on the 3rd floor of the old building that had a view of the loading dock and a radiator that clanged intermittently at night. She taught her courses. She held her office hours. She graded papers with the same rigorous attention she had always applied, leaving comments that were sometimes longer than the papers themselves. She also paid attention. It started small, the way these things always started small. In mid-February, 3 weeks into the spring semester, a student named Danny Ose came to Alara's office hours. Danny was a second-year master's student who had taken one of Alara's courses the previous year, and she was technically enrolled in Simone Hargrove's Quantitative Risk Modeling Seminar, which was the primary graduate-level course that had formerly been Alara's. Oh, she stood in the doorway of Alara's office for a moment before Alara looked up from the paper she was marking. "Dr. Voss, do you have a second?" "Come in," Alara said. "Close the door?" Danny sat down in the chair across from Alara's desk, the one with the slightly worn upholstery that Alara had brought from her old office, and she set her bag on the floor and then just sat there for a moment, her hands clasped on her knees. "I don't know who else to talk to," she said finally. Alara put down her pen. "Okay," she said. "I don't want to get anyone in trouble. I want to be really clear about that. I'm confused about something, and I don't know if it's me or if it's... I don't know." "What are you confused about?" Alara said. Danny took a breath. "There's this tutoring service that Dr. Hargrove mentioned in class. It's through an external provider. It's not the University Tutoring Center. It's a private company. She said it was optional, that it was a supplemental resource for students who wanted additional support. It's called Meridian Academic Solutions." Alara did not change her expression. "Go on," she said. "The packages are expensive, like $300 for a semester access. Some students can afford it, some can't. I looked it up online and it seems legitimate. There are testimonials, there's a website, but..." She stopped. "But," Alara said, "the students who have subscribed to it are doing significantly better on assessments," Danny said. "Not like better because they're studying more. I mean significantly better. Like, there's a student in the cohort who failed the qualifying assessment in the fall. Failed it by a lot. Oh, and this semester she has a 92 on the first module. I know her, Dr. Voss. I've studied with her. She is not... The improvement doesn't make sense with the work I've seen her do." Alara was quiet for a moment. The radiator clanged once, softly. "How many students have subscribed to Meridian?" she said. "In our cohort, I count at least 8, maybe more, who haven't mentioned it. And their grade trajectories compared to non-subscribers..." Danny looked at her steadily. "That's the thing. I started tracking it because I'm the kind of person who tracks things, and I thought I was imagining it. I wasn't. There's almost a clean line." Alara nodded slowly. She picked up her pen again, not to write, just to hold. "Do you still have the course materials from your fall semester with me?" "Yes." "Keep them somewhere safe," Alara said. "Oh, off your university email account? On a personal drive?" Danny looked at her. "Should I be worried?" Alara looked back at her. "I think you should be careful," she said. Those are different things. She did not do anything immediately. This was the discipline that most people in her position would have lacked. The pull toward action when you see something that is wrong, especially when you have been wronged yourself. When you are sitting in the office with the view of the loading dock and the rattling radiator while the person who replaced you is operating in your classroom, with your students, with your graduate program, that pull is almost physical. It has the quality of a reflex. The harder you have worked and the more you have been taken from, the sharper it becomes. Alara had spent 11 years in a field that was fundamentally about not acting on that kind of reflex. Finance, at its most rigorous, was the discipline of patience, of waiting for the complete picture before committing capital, of understanding that the first signal was almost never the full story, and that acting on incomplete information was the most efficient way to lose everything. She waited. She did 3 things. First, she did what she always did when she encountered a potential financial irregularity. She researched the entity, Meridian Academic Solutions. She spent 4 evenings researching the company with the same methodology she applied to corporate due diligence. She pulled the incorporation records. The company was incorporated in Delaware, which was unremarkable. She found the registered agent and the listed officers. She pulled the company's website and ran a reverse lookup on the domain registration. She found the IP address and cross-referenced it against other domains registered to the same host. She pulled Meridian's SEC filings, which did not exist, which meant the company was either private or operating below the reporting threshold. She found the owner on the 3rd evening. It was a holding company called Hargrove Novak Educational Ventures, LLC. She sat with that for a long time. The second thing she did was begin attending, as unobtrusively as possible, the publicly accessible portions of the quantitative risk modeling program, colloquia, workshop sessions, events that were open to the department. She was faculty. She had a right to attend. She took notes. She observed. She paid attention to which students were flourishing and which were struggling and which appeared to be performing in ways that did not match the capabilities she had observed when they were in her courses. The third thing she did was make a list, not of wrongdoings, of questions. She had learned this from 11 years of teaching financial forensics. You did not make accusations. You made observations. You documented anomalies. You asked questions whose answers either confirmed or dispelled the pattern you thought you were seeing. If the pattern held, you had evidence. If the pattern dissolved, you had learned something. Either way, you had done the work. By April, the pattern held. She called Cassidy in the first week of April. "I need you to pull something for me," she said. "What kind of something?" Cassidy said. "A Delaware LLC registration for a company called Hargrove Novak Educational Ventures. And anything that connects it to a Dr. Simone Hargrove at Whitmore University or to Marcus Hargrove Board of Trustees." Cassidy's voice changed slightly. "Alara, I'm not doing anything yet," Alara said. "I'm building the picture." "What does the picture look like so far?" Alara told her. She told her about Danny Osei, about the grade trajectories, about the company name on the domain registration, about the Delaware incorporation. She told her calmly, in the order she had discovered the information, the way she taught her students to present financial analysis, linear, documented, no emotional editorializing. When she finished, Cassidy was quiet for a long moment. "Do you understand," Cassidy said carefully, "that what you're describing, and if it's accurate, is not an employment dispute?" "I know what it is," Alara said. "It's academic fraud. It potentially implicates federal student aid regulations. It could—" "I know," Alara said. "Are you going to the university with this?" "No," Alara said. "Not yet. Alara, if I go to the university with this right now, Gerald Ashworth, or Helena Crane, or whoever manages institutional risk, will do one of 2 things. They will cover it up, which is likely given who Simone's father is and what he's building for them. Or they will conduct a slow internal investigation that allows everything to be cleaned up before any external authority can look at it. Either way, it disappears." "So what are you going to do?" "I'm going to let the students do it," Alara said. A pause. "Oh, explain that." "If the students file a formal complaint through the university's academic integrity office, it creates a paper trail that the university cannot simply close. The academic integrity process has its own documentation requirements and timelines that are separate from administrative discretion. If the complaint is substantive, and if the evidence is well organized, and if it is filed in the right format, you're going to help them file it. I'm going to teach them how to document what they've already observed, Alara said. There's a difference. There is a difference, Cassidy said. That will be functionally invisible if this goes badly. I know, Alara said. And the connection to your employment situation is real and is documented, and I am setting it aside for now because if this is what I think it is, it is larger than my employment situation. Cassidy exhaled. You know, I'm going to tell you this is risky. You just did. I'm also going to tell you that if you're right, and if this is documented properly, the accreditation implications alone could bring down the entire department administration. I know, Alara said. For the first time in the conversation, something shifted slightly in her voice. Not triumph. Something quieter and colder than triumph. The specific tone of someone who has been patient for a long time and can now see the distance narrowing. I know exactly what the accreditation implications are. She met with Danny again in the 3rd week of April, this time off campus, a coffee shop 2 blocks from the university, a place that smelled like ground coffee and the particular yeasty warmth of a commercial oven. Oh, steam from the espresso machine gathering near the ceiling. It was mid-afternoon and the shop was only half full. She brought nothing with her, no notebook, no folder. She had already trained herself not to leave a paper trail for anything that did not need to be documented yet. I've done some additional research, Alara said, on Meridian Academic Solutions. Danny wrapped both hands around her cup. She was wearing a blue winter coat that was slightly too large, the kind of coat that suggested it had been bought for durability rather than fit. And? The company appears to be connected to Dr. Hargrove's family, Alara said. She said it flatly, without emphasis, without the inflection she might have used if she were trying to make the statement land in a particular way. She watched Danny absorb it. Danny absorbed it quietly. Like she was the kind of student, Alara had always respected this about her, who processed information before she responded to it. So she's running a tutoring service, Danny said slowly, that she's directing her own students to, that she may own or have a financial interest in. That would be the straightforward interpretation, Alara said, but you think it's more than that. I think, Alara said carefully, that the grade trajectory data you observed is worth formal documentation. I think if that data, properly compiled, suggests that performance outcomes are correlated with payment to an outside vendor in a way that cannot be explained by academic effort alone, then that documentation would be worth presenting to the university's Academic Integrity Office. Danny looked at her. Oh, would they do anything? If the documentation is structured correctly, they are required to open an investigation. It's in the faculty handbook. Once an investigation is opened through the Academic Integrity Office, it is not under the discretionary control of the dean or the provost. It has its own timeline and process. What does structured correctly mean? Alara looked out the window at the street. A woman walked by with a small dog that kept stopping to smell a cracked section of pavement. Someone on a bicycle navigated around a delivery truck with the fluid patience of someone who had been doing it for years. It means, she said, that you document observations, not accusations. You compile the grade data you have access to. Your own grades are yours, and anything that other students share voluntarily. And you note the timeline of the Meridian recommendation and its relation to the grade changes. You present it as a series of documented anomalies that you are requesting the office to investigate. You do not speculate in the document. You do not make claims about intent. You describe what you observed and ask questions. Danny was quiet for a moment. Would other students need to be involved? The stronger the documentation, the more likely the investigation is to move forward. Multiple students, multiple observations, multiple data points. I know 4 people who would do it, Danny said. Possibly more. Alara nodded. Before you talk to them, she said, I need to tell you something, and you need to hear it clearly. Okay? I have a personal interest in what happens to Dr. Hargrove in this department, Alara said. You know that. Everyone in the department knows that. If this comes out, and if it goes through an investigation, it will come out that I spoke with you before the complaint was filed. I want you to be clear-eyed about that. If you file this complaint, You file it because you believe it is the right thing to do based on what you have observed, not because I led you to it. The decision needs to be yours." Danny looked at her for a long moment. There was something in her expression that Alara could not quite categorize. Not resentment, not calculation, something more layered. "Did you know about this before she was hired?" Danny asked. "No," Alara said. "I didn't." "But you figured it out." "I suspected it. I researched it." "Because of what happened to you," Danny said. Alara did not deny it. "Yes," she said. Danny nodded slowly. "Oh, I'm going to be honest with you, Dr. Voss. I would have found this eventually on my own. I was already tracking the data. You just..." She paused. "You gave me the framework to understand what I was looking at." "That's what I'm supposed to do," Alara said. "Teach you how to look at data." Danny smiled briefly, without humor. "Okay," she said. The complaint was filed on May 2nd. 7 students filed jointly. Danny had spent 2 weeks quietly organizing it, collecting voluntary accounts and data points from other students in the program. She had been careful and methodical about it, which told Alara that she had internalized the instructions about documentation over accusation, which told her in turn that Danny Osei was going to be very good at whatever she ended up doing professionally. The complaint itself was 11 pages long. It laid out, in ordered sections, the following documented observations: the manner and context in which Meridian Academic Solutions had been recommended to enrolled students, the pricing structure of Meridian services, the observable grade trajectories of students who had and had not subscribed, drawn from grade data to which the filing students had legitimate access through their own records and through voluntary sharing among peers, the results of a domain registration search that one of the filing students, a master's candidate who had previously worked in tech, had independently conducted, and the public corporate records linking Meridian to Hargrove Novak Educational Ventures, LLC. It ended with a single, clean question. Does the professor's financial interest in Meridian Academic Solutions, combined with the observable grade outcomes for paying versus non-paying students, represent a potential conflict of interest and academic integrity? Violation warranting investigation. It did not accuse anyone of selling grades. It asked whether the data merited investigation. The Academic Integrity Office was required, under the faculty handbook, to acknowledge receipt within 5 business days and to open a preliminary review within 15. They acknowledged receipt in 4 days. The preliminary review opened on May 19th. Alara learned about it through the normal course of departmental information flow. Faculty meetings, hallway conversations, the particular quality of tension that departments develop when something is officially unspoken but universally understood. She watched Gerald Ashworth at the May faculty meeting. And he was 3 minutes late, which was unusual, and he spent the first 10 minutes of the meeting discussing the upcoming commencement schedule with a level of detailed attention that suggested he was very consciously not discussing something else. She watched Helena Crane, who was not at the faculty meeting, but whose administrative assistant sent an email that afternoon rescheduling 2 departmental appointments that had been on the calendar for weeks. She watched Simone Hargrove. This was the thing Alara had not entirely expected. Simone Hargrove's response to the investigation was not the response of someone who was guilty. It was not the response of someone who knew they had done something wrong and were calculating their exposure. It was the response of someone who was genuinely surprised. But there was a quality to the way she moved through the department in those days, a slightly reduced ease, a more deliberate composure, the look of someone who had been told that the floor was solid and had then discovered a give in it, that Alara found herself watching with genuine attention. She could not tell from watching whether Simone had known exactly what she was doing or whether she had occupied the comfortable middle space that people from certain backgrounds occupied routinely, the space where the line between legitimate family support and institutional corruption was so normalized that it was genuinely invisible to them. This distinction mattered professionally, Alara knew, for the investigation, for the findings, for the ultimate disposition. It did not exactly matter to her personally. The investigation expanded. I knew this was the first sign that the Academic Integrity Office had found something, because preliminary reviews that found nothing did not expand. They closed with a notation. The expansion, which Alara heard about from Cassidy, who had been contacted by one of the filing students for a brief consultation on the process, meant that the investigators had requested additional records, financial records, email records, the original Meridian subscriber data, which the university's general counsel was apparently now in discussions with Meridian's legal representation about producing. Cassidy called her on a Thursday evening in the second week of June, after the semester had ended and the campus had that particular emptiness of early summer. Students gone, most faculty away, the building's bones more audible somehow. "Oh, it's expanding again," Cassidy said. Alara was at her desk in her third-floor office, eating takeout noodles from a container and reviewing a draft article she was supposed to submit to a journal by the end of the month. The radiator was silent in the summer. Without it, the room was quieter than she had realized. To what? They've brought in external auditors. The university's board of trustees, PSAUJ, or a subset of it, has apparently been briefed. There's a conflict of interest question that's been flagged, which is significant because conflict of interest proceedings at the trustee level trigger a separate governance process. Alara set down her takeout container. "Marcus Hargrove. He is on the board. His daughter is the subject of the investigation. Maybe the question of whether he used his trustee position to facilitate her placement is now..." Cassidy paused. "Alara, this has gotten big." "I know," she said. "The accreditation angle you mentioned, someone else got there." "Of course someone did." "The regional accreditation body has apparently been contacted, or will be. There are federal student aid questions because some of the students who paid for Meridian are on financial aid, and if the fees were effectively a required cost of achieving passing grades, then it's potentially a Title IV violation," Alara said. "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. Outside through the window, the late evening summer light was catching the loading dock in a way that made it look unexpectedly gold. The steel of the dock's edge, the warm concrete walls, it looked, for a moment, like nothing she had ever noticed from this window before. "What happens to the students?" she said. "The ones who paid." "Depends on the investigation findings. If the grades they received were awarded in exchange for payment rather than academic merit, there are questions about degree integrity, transcript accuracy. It's a mess. But the students are generally treated as the harmed party unless there's evidence of active collusion." "There won't be," Alara said. "Danny's documentation was very careful about that. The students who filed were the ones who didn't pay, who watched their peers get better grades for money they didn't have." "Then they're probably okay," Cassidy said. Alara nodded to herself in the empty office. "What about the employment question?" she said. Cassidy's tone changed slightly, not toward sympathy, but toward the careful precision of someone choosing words deliberately. "The conflict of interest findings at the trustee level, if they're what they appear to be, would call into question the process by which Simone Hargrove was hired, which calls into question the process by which your position was reclassified, which means the documentation you built in October is now relevant to a process that is significantly larger than an employment dispute. I want to be made whole," Alara said. "I want my position back, with my research budget, my graduate student allocation, and my course structure. I am not interested in a settlement payout or a new title. Unless I want what was taken. That's going to depend on what they find and how badly they want to avoid further external scrutiny." "How badly do you think they want to avoid further external scrutiny?" "Given the accreditation question," Cassidy said, "I think they want to avoid further external scrutiny quite a lot." The formal findings of the academic integrity investigation were issued on September 9th, before the start of the fall semester. Alara received a copy through Cassidy, who had been formally representing her interests since July. The findings were 43 pages long. She read all of them. The core findings were as follows. Dr. Simone Hargrove had a direct financial interest through her family's holding company in Meridian Academic Solutions. She had recommended Meridian to enrolled students in her course without disclosing this financial interest. The investigation found a statistically significant correlation between Meridian subscription and course grade outcomes that could not be fully explained by academic factors. The investigation also found email evidence, accessed through the university's legal process, of internal communications suggesting that grade outcomes were, in at least some cases, discussed in terms that went beyond standard tutoring outcomes. The language of the findings was careful, as institutional language always was. It found that Dr. Hargrove's conduct demonstrated a pattern inconsistent with the university's academic integrity standards. It found that the financial arrangement created, at minimum, the appearance of a conflict of interest that compromised the integrity of the grading process. It recommended that Dr. Hargrove's employment be terminated. 3 pages were devoted to the findings about the hiring process itself. The investigation had reviewed the search committee minutes, the communications between Gerald Ashworth and members of the Board of Trustees, and certain emails between Ashworth and Marcus Hargrove. The findings in this section were also careful. They found procedural irregularities in the faculty search process and communications between administrative leadership and board members that exceeded the appropriate scope of trustee involvement in faculty hiring decisions. They recommended a full review of the Department of Finance's administrative leadership. The final section addressed remediation. Among the recommended remediation actions was the following line, which Alara read 3 times. The university should review, in consultation with affected faculty, the circumstances of any position reclassifications that occurred in conjunction with the irregular hiring process with the goal of restoring equitable employment conditions. She set the document down on her desk. The office was warm in the September morning light. Even from this window, even over the loading dock, the morning came in at an angle that was almost kind. Gerald Ashworth went on administrative leave on September 15th. The announcement was made in a brief email from the provost's office that said he was stepping back to allow for an impartial review of departmental administration, and that an interim dean would be appointed for the fall semester. Helena Crane issued a statement acknowledging the investigation's findings and committing to a comprehensive review of hiring practices and faculty governance procedures. The statement did not mention Alara by name, which was expected, but it used language. Faculty whose positions were affected by the irregular process that was sufficiently specific. Marcus Hargrove resigned from the Board of Trustees on September 18th. The university's press release described the resignation as voluntary and offered thanks for his service. It said nothing about the Hargrove Novak Finance and Innovation Center, which was still under construction and whose naming rights were now, Alara imagined, the subject of some urgent conversations in the university president's office. Simone Hargrove's employment was terminated effective September 22nd. Alara was not told this directly. She read it on a faculty affairs listserv that someone had forwarded to her. She was eating breakfast when she read it. Black coffee, toast, the particular flat morning light of early fall. She read the forwarded message once, finished her coffee, and went to work. The meeting with the interim dean and the provost happened in the first week of October. This time the conference room on the 4th floor of Whitmore Hall felt different. Not physically different, the same oval table, the same institutional carpet, the same parking structure view, but the atmospheric weight of the room had changed. Alara sat in the same chair she had sat in a year ago. The interim dean, a woman named Doctor, Patricia Hollis, who had come from the economics department and who Alara had always respected as a fair reader of institutional dynamics, sat at the head of the table. Helena Crane sat beside her. Cassidy sat beside Alara. "We want to discuss the path forward," Patricia Hollis said. "So do we," Cassidy said. The meeting lasted 2 hours. Alara let Cassidy do most of the talking, which was appropriate. This was finally a legal and contractual negotiation, and Cassidy was better at this kind of negotiation than Alara was. Alara interjected twice, once to clarify a specific provision in her original contract, and once near the end of the meeting, when Helena Crane made an observation about the challenge of reconstituting the quantitative methods program given the circumstances. "The program is intact," Alara said. "The curriculum exists. The graduate students are still enrolled. The courses were taught this year, poorly, but they were taught. The program does not need to be reconstituted. It needs its faculty back." Helena Crane looked at her. Something moved across her expression that Alara could not read precisely. "We understand that," she said. "Good," Alara said. "Then we agree on the basic structure." The terms of her reinstatement were finalized on October 14th, exactly 1 year and 3 days after the boxes had appeared in her office. She received her position back. Senior Associate Professor of Quantitative Methods, with the full research budget allocation, the full graduate student access, the course release. Says the documentation of her lecturer in residence period was to be removed from her permanent file and replaced with a notation of administrative reassignment under review. The year counted toward her tenure clock. Back pay for the differential between her reclassified and original salary was to be paid within 30 days. The agreement also contained one additional provision that Cassidy had negotiated quietly, and that Alara considered the most important of all of them. The university was to commission an external review of all faculty hiring decisions in the previous 3 academic years in which trustee communications had been a documented factor. This had nothing to do with Alara's employment. It was prospective protection for other faculty who had not had the documentation or the knowledge to protect themselves. She signed the agreement at Cassidy's office, on a plain table with a coffee ring on it that someone had tried and failed to wipe away. Cassidy slid the pages across to her one at a time, and Alara read each one before she signed it. Every page, every line, the way she always had. When she was done, Cassidy refilled their coffee cups and leaned back in her chair. "You want to celebrate?" she said. "Not particularly," Alara said. "Because you haven't won yet?" Alara shook her head. "Because I started winning in October of last year," she said, "when I decided not to pack those boxes." Cassidy looked at her steadily. "What did you do instead?" "I sent the records request for the building camera footage," Alara said, "before I did anything else. Before the meeting, before the lawyer call. While it was still fresh. But because I knew that if I lost the footage, I lost the timeline, and if I lost the timeline, I lost everything." Cassidy was quiet for a moment. "Did you ever need the footage?" Alara thought about it. "No," she said, "but I needed to know I had it." She moved back into her office on a Monday morning in late October, which was not the same Monday morning it had been before. The quad outside her window had the stripped-down, slightly weathered look of late fall, rather than the just-beginning look of fall's first days. But the window was the same window, and the afternoon light still came through it in the particular way she had noted, the way that made the room feel almost warm. She had not kept the boxes. She had broken them down and put them in the recycling when she moved into the third-floor office, because she had not needed them. Now, as the bookshelves she had built herself were still there. Someone had moved a few books around, probably the department coordinator who had managed the office during the transition, but they were mostly as she had left them. The letter from the American Finance Association was still on the wall. She had brought one new thing for the office, a framed printout of the Academic Integrity Investigation's table of contents. Just the table of contents. No findings, nothing identifying. Just the structure of the thing, the numbered sections, the ordered way it had moved from observation to documentation to finding. She hung it on the wall beside the AFA letter. Tobias Marin, Oz her graduate student, who had been reassigned to another faculty member during the year, and who had emailed her the day the reinstatement was announced to say he would like to continue his doctoral work with her if that was still possible. Knocked on the door at 10:30 with a draft chapter and the slightly tentative expression of someone returning to something they had thought might be gone. "Come in," she said. Closed the door. He sat in the chair across from her desk, the same chair with the worn upholstery, and he put the draft on the desk between them. He had put sticky notes on several pages. She appreciated sticky notes. They meant he had already identified the problems himself. "I've been working on the liquidity risk modeling section," he said. "I think I found an issue with the variance assumption. But I wasn't sure if I was misreading the framework." She pulled the draft toward her. "Show me," she said. He leaned forward and pointed to a page. She looked at where he was pointing, and she started reading. This was it. This was the thing. Not the investigation, not the findings, not the signed agreement. This, exactly this. The draft with the sticky notes, the student leaning across the desk to point at the problem he had found, the window with the afternoon light, the work. "You're not misreading the framework," she said. "The assumption is wrong. Let's figure out why." She picked up her pen. She started to write. There was, it turned out, one more thing. Danny Osei came to see her in November. On a Thursday afternoon, when the first real cold of the season had arrived, and the heating in the building was working hard enough that the radiators, even the new ones, ticked and expanded in the walls. She sat in the same chair she had sat in at the coffee shop in April, except this time she was in Ilara's real office, with the bookshelves and the afternoon light, and she had the look of someone who had made a decision she felt good about and wanted to tell someone. "I wanted to update you," she said. On what's happening with the students who paid Meridian. A few of them came to see me. I've been talking to people since the investigation findings came out. Some of them feel guilty. Like they cheated even though they didn't understand they were cheating. Ilara nodded. Hey, that's a reasonable response. I've been telling them that what they need to do is document what they know, what they understood at the time, and submit it to the Academic Integrity Office. Not as admissions of wrongdoing, as testimony about their experience as a harmed party. Ilara looked at her. I've been using the framework, Danny said. The one you taught me. Document observations, not accusations. Ask questions instead of making claims. Has it been useful? 3 students have done it so far. 2 more are thinking about it. She paused. I didn't come to ask for help with that. I came to ask you something else. What? Danny looked at her directly. She was the kind of person, Ilara thought, who had always had this quality. A directness that was not aggression, just refusal to approach things sideways. Did you know, when you told me to keep my course materials somewhere safe, that this was going to go where it went? Ilara considered the question. It was worth an honest answer. I knew it might, she said. I didn't know it would. But you built for it going where it went, Danny said. I built for the possibility, Ilara said. That's all you can ever do? Build the structure that makes the right outcome possible. You can't control the outcome. But you knew the structure, Danny said. You knew what the faculty handbook said about academic integrity investigations. You knew about the accreditation implications. You knew about the conflict of interest process. I've read the faculty handbook, Ilara said. Multiple times. It's a document most faculty never look at unless they have a specific reason to. Unless I had a specific reason to. Danny nodded slowly. She looked at Ilara for a moment longer, with an expression that was something adjacent to respect, but not quite that. Something more even, more considered. I want to do what you do, she said. Not finance, or finance partly, but reading the structure, understanding the rules better than the people who made them, using the rules the way they're supposed to be used. Ilara looked at her. You already do it, she said. Danny smiled slightly. I had a good teacher. Ilara did not respond to that. She picked up her pen. Sit down, she said. Tell me what you're working on. Danny reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. The semester ended in December. Has the way semesters always ended? In a compressed rush of finals and grading, and the particular institutional holding of breath before the break. Ilara graded papers until 11:30 on the last Wednesday, then packed her bag and turned off the lights in her office. The campus was down to a skeleton. A few maintenance workers, a few graduate students finishing dissertations, the particular quality of a building that knows it is nearly empty. She walked down the hallway to the elevator, pressed the button, waited. The hallway was lit in that half-lit way buildings had at night. Overhead lights reduced, a slight hum in the walls. The carpet stretched away in both directions, that institutional pattern she had been walking on for 12 years and had stopped consciously seeing. The elevator opened. She stepped in. On the ground floor, she signed out at the security desk. The security guard, a man named Terrell, who had been there for 9 years and who always asked her how her research was going because she had once told him about it and he had seemed genuinely interested, was reading something on his phone. Night, Dr. Voss, he said without looking up. Night, Terrell, she said. Outside the cold was clean and sharp. The quad was empty, the fountain turned off for the winter, a fine layer of frost on the stone bench where the pigeons had been fighting in October. The construction lights on the south side of campus were still on, running around the clock on the building that would be, when finished, the Hargrove Finance and Innovation Center. Except that the naming was now in question, pending the Board of Trustees' review of all gifts associated with Marcus Hargrove's tenure. Alara stood on the quad steps for a moment in the cold, looking at the construction lights. She pulled out her phone and checked the emails she had been expecting from the journal she had submitted her article to in October. The article on derivative misclassification patterns, the one that had been 2 years in the making, the one she had kept working on through the lecturer in residence year, in the third-floor office with the rattling radiator. The email had arrived at 8:43 that evening. She read it in the cold, in the empty quad, under the construction lights. The article had been accepted for publication. She put her phone in her pocket. She walked to her car.